All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are digging into one of the most controversial and honestly most misunderstood political thinkers in all of history, Niccolò Machiavelli.
You've definitely heard his name thrown around, right? I mean, it's not usually a compliment. To call someone Machiavellian is basically to call them a ruthless, cynical, backstabbing political operator. His name literally became an adjective for cunning and bad faith.
But here's the big question. Was the man himself actually a teacher of evil? Did he really write the playbook for tyrants? Or was he a champion of liberty? Or, maybe something way more complicated. Let's dig in and see if we can separate the man from the myth.
So, first things first. To even begin to get a handle on his ideas, you have to understand the world he lived in. And let me tell you, it was brutal. For him, this wasn't some abstract thought experiment. It was all about survival.
So meet the man himself, Niccolò Machiavelli. Now, he wasn't some king or a famous general. He was a civil servant, a diplomat for the city-state of Florence. Think of him as a high-ranking government official who had a front-row seat to how the sausage of power really gets made. And it was messy, full of treachery and violence.
And his life was a total roller coaster. Look at this timeline. He gets his big break when the powerful Medici family gets kicked out of Florence and a republic is set up. But then, just over a decade later, the Medici comes storming back. And just like that, his career is over. He goes from diplomat to political prisoner, literally overnight. And his world, it was pure chaos. I mean, you've got constantly shifting alliances, armies for hire who'd switch sides for a better paycheck, and governments that could collapse in a week. It was a complete free-for-all. The only real goal for anyone in power was just to survive to the next day.
So when the Medici came back, things got really bad for Machiavelli, personally. He was accused of plotting against them, arrested, and then brutally tortured. And even though he never confessed, because he was innocent, they still threw him in prison and then exiled him from his beloved Florence. He lost absolutely everything.
So here he is, out in the cold, totally stripped of his career, and just desperate to get back in the game. And it's from this place of exile and desperation that he writes his most famous, or infamous, book, The Prince.
Now, what was The Prince? Well, it was basically a how-to guide for a new ruler on how to grab power, and this is the important part, how to keep it. And this thing just completely shattered all the old rules of morality. Machiavelli wasn't interested in how a prince should act in some perfect world. No, he wanted to talk about what actually works in the real, messy world he knew so well.
This is probably his most famous line. Is it better to be feared or loved? And Machiavelli's answer is cold, hard logic. He says, look, love is nice, but people are fickle. They'll break that bond of love the second it's inconvenient. But fear is based on the dread of punishment, and that, my friends, never goes away. It's a chilling but incredibly practical way of looking at human nature.
I love this quote. Be the fox to see the traps, and the lion to scare off the wolves. It perfectly captures his whole idea. You can't just be strong, because you'll walk right into a trap, and you can't just be clever, because you'll get torn apart by the wolves. A successful ruler, he says, has to be both, and know exactly when to be which.
So yeah, his advice gets pretty dark. Use violence, lie, get rid of your rivals. It's all on the table. But, and this is so important, he's not advising this for fun or for personal greed. It's all in service of the state. The ultimate goal is stability and security. For Machiavelli, if a ruler has to commit some terrible acts to create a society that lasts, well, sometimes that's a price that has to be paid.
Okay, so right about now you're probably thinking, wow, this guy is the absolute worst. A total cynic, an advisor to tyrants. But just when you think you've got him pegged, the story takes a turn, and we meet a completely different Machiavelli. Because get this, in his other big book, a much longer work called The Discourses on Livy, he goes all in on republics, a government by the people. He writes passionately about liberty, about self-government, about why citizens need to be virtuous. It's pretty much the exact opposite of what you'd expect after reading The Prince.
And this really lays out the contradiction, doesn't it? On one hand, you have The Prince, which is like an emergency handbook for one person trying to fix a broken state. It's pragmatic, ruthless. On the other hand, The Discourses is a blueprint for how a healthy, free society of citizens should work. So, one book for the dictator, one for the people. What's going on here?
Well, believe it or not, those ideas in the Discourses became incredibly influential.
They helped form the basis for what we call modern republicanism. And I'm not kidding when I say this. His work was studied by the American founding fathers. People like John Adams and James Madison were reading Machiavelli when they were thinking about how to build the United States.
So that brings us back to the big puzzle. How do we square this? How can the same guy write the handbook for tyrants and be a hero to Republicans? Saint or sinner?
I think this just says it all. The very man who was tortured and exiled by the leaders of Florence is now buried in one of its most famous and holy churches. It's the perfect irony, right? He died an outcast, but in death, he became this central, unavoidable figure in the history of political ideas.
And his influence is just massive. It stretches across centuries and all over the political map. I mean, think about it. You've got the US founding fathers, champions of liberty, reading him. And then you have someone like Joseph Stalin, one of history's most brutal dictators, who kept a copy of The Prince on his nightstand and scribbled notes in it. That tells you everything about the raw power of his ideas.
It's almost like every era just cherry picks the Machiavelli they want. In the 16th and 17th centuries, kings and queens read The Prince as a manual for staying in charge. Then, in the Enlightenment, revolutionaries focus on his republican ideas to argue for freedom. And today, political scientists study him for his cold-eyed realism about how power works. Everyone finds something they can use.
And maybe that's the point. Machiavelli doesn't give us easy, comforting answers. He just holds up a mirror to the world of politics and shows it to us as it actually is, not how we wish it would be. And he leaves us with this really uncomfortable, really important question that we're still wrestling with today. In the world of power, is it really possible to be both good and effective? He forces you to think, and that's why we're still talking about him 500 years later.